Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling large language models.
Oh, yeah.
These things are everywhere right now.
They are.
And it's really tough to keep up.
It is.
But
Yeah.
you've sent in some really interesting stuff about DeepSeek-V3.
Uh-huh.
And I got to say, I'm excited to dig into this one with you.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely caught my eye.
Yeah.
Especially that note you sent about feeling overwhelmed by all the new LLM projects
Right.
just popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
DeepSeek-V3 seems like it might be tailor-made for solo developers and startups.
Okay.
The people who need serious power,
Yeah.
but don't have Google-sized resources.
That's exactly it. That's what makes this deep dive so important.
Yeah.
We're going beyond the hype
Right.
to see if this is something you could actually use in your projects.
Right.
So we've got the research paper, some code repos,
Oh, nice.
even a few real-world examples
Oh, cool.
to help us understand where DeepSeek-V3 fits into the whole LLM landscape.
Awesome. Knowing your love for getting your hands dirty with code, we'll make sure to cover the practical aspects too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure, I'm excited for that.
How it works, how to run it, those sorts of things.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
All right.
What is DeepSeek-V3, and why should we even care?
At its core, DeepSeek-V3 is an open-source large language model, meaning you can access and modify it.
Okay.
It boasts a massive 671 billion parameters.
Whoa.
That's bigger than even Llama, though not quite as gigantic as some of the GPT models out there.
Okay, but size isn't everything, right?
You got it.
There has to be something more to it than just a big parameter count.
Absolutely. What makes DeepSeek-V3 stand out is its focus on efficiency. It uses something called a mixture of experts architecture, or MOE.
MOE. Okay, I'm all for efficiency, but now you're just throwing jargon at me.
Right.
Break that down for me and for our listener who might be hearing this for the first time.
Imagine instead of one giant neural network trying to do everything, you've got a team of specialized experts. Okay.
Each expert is really good at a specific task.
So kind of like a startup team.
Yeah.
Where you've got your coding whiz, your design guru,
Right.
your marketing mastermind.
Yeah.
Each focusing on what they do best.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And just like in a well-run startup, only the experts relevant to the task at hand are activated.
Okay.
This means DeepSeek-V3 doesn't waste processing power on things it doesn't need,
Okay.
which is a huge win for efficiency.
I'm starting to see why this would be appealing,
Yeah,
especially if you're working with limited resources.
that's the best
But how does this actually translate into practical benefits for someone coding with DeepSeek-V3?
Think about it this way. With a traditional LLM, even if you're just asking it to write a simple poem, the entire model has to fire up.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of wasted energy.
Yeah.
With DeepSeek-V3 and its MOE architecture, only the poetry expert gets called in, so to speak.
Okay.
That means faster processing, lower costs, and potentially even the ability to run it on less powerful hardware. So it's not just about making LLMs more efficient in general.
Right.
It's about making them more accessible
Yeah,
to people who don't have access to massive server farms.
exactly. And they've managed to do it without sacrificing performance,
Wow.
which is a pretty impressive feat.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the paper also mentioned something called multi-token prediction. Is this another one of those efficiency things?
It is. You can think of it like predictive text on your phone,
Okay.
but on a much grander scale.
Okay.
Instead of predicting just the next word in a sequence, DeepSeek-V3 can predict multiple words at once.
Huh.
This speeds up text generation significantly.
So less waiting around for the model to spit out results.
Right.
Which is always a plus when you're in the middle of a coding project.
Absolutely. And it also opens up possibilities for some cool features like what's called speculative decoding.
Okay.
It's a bit technical, but basically it allows the model to explore multiple possible continuations of a text simultaneously, leading to more creative and nuanced outputs.
Interesting. So not only faster, but potentially more creative too. That's definitely something I'd want to explore further.
We will. But before we get too deep into those applications, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how DeepSeek-V3 was actually trained.
Okay.
Because that's another area where they've made some pretty significant strides in terms of efficiency.
All right, let's dive into that. I'm looking at the paper here.
Okay.
And it says they trained DeepSeek-V3 on a data set of 14.8 trillion tokens.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that's like a lot.
It's a truly mind-boggling amount of data.
Right.
But the key here is that they didn't just brute force it with a ton of computing power.
Right.
They achieved this massive training scale with remarkable efficiency.
Okay, so how did they pull that off? What's the secret sauce?
They used a combination of clever techniques. One of the key ingredients is something called FP8 mixed precision training. Now, I know that sounds like technical jargon.
You can say that again?
But essentially, it's a way of using less memory during the training process without sacrificing accuracy. It's like finding a way to compress the data without losing any of the important details.
So they're essentially squeezing more out of the hardware they have.
Exactly. And this is a big deal because it means you don't need a supercomputer to train a model like this.
Oh, wow.
It opens up possibilities for smaller research teams and independent developers who might not have access to those kinds of resources.
That's really impressive. But training a model this massive, even with efficient techniques,
Right.
I imagine there are still challenges. Right?
Yeah,
Like, how do you even coordinate all that computation?
you're absolutely right. One of the biggest hurdles with training large models,
Yeah.
especially those using the MOE architecture,
Okay.
is something called the communication bottleneck.
Okay, break that down for me.
Yeah.
What's a communication bottleneck in this context?
Imagine you're trying to cook a huge feast, and you've got a team of chefs all working in separate kitchens, but the only way they can communicate is through a single tiny doorway.
Uh-huh.
That doorway is going to create a bottleneck, slowing down the whole process.
So in this analogy, the chefs are the different parts of the model.
Yes.
And the doorway is...
The communication channels between the different computing nodes.
Okay.
And with traditional MOE models, this communication back and forth can take up a significant amount of time and resources.
Got it. So how did the DeepSeek team overcome this bottleneck?
They developed a very clever strategy that allows for near-perfect computation-communication overlap.
Okay.
In simpler terms, they found a way to keep the different parts of the model busy crunching data while simultaneously sending and receiving information,
Okay.
minimizing those communication delays.
So back to our chef analogy, it's like they've installed a high-speed dumbwaiter system.
Yeah,
So ingredients can be sent back and forth without interrupting the cooking process.
that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And this innovation not only speeds up training, but also reduces the cost,
Yeah.
further enhancing DeepSeek-V3's accessibility.
All right, so we've established that DeepSeek-V3 is powerful, efficient, and potentially more accessible than some other LLMs out there.
Right.
But is it just one-trick pony? Can it do more than just generate text?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
DeepSeek-V3 isn't just about mimicking human language. It's also designed to reason and problem solve.
Okay.
They've incorporated knowledge distillation from a chain of thought model called DeepSeek-R1.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What's a chain of thought model?
Yeah.
How does that play into all of this?
Imagine you're trying to solve a logic puzzle.
Okay.
You don't just jump to the answer.
Right.
You think through the steps, you eliminate possibilities, you make logical connections.
Right.
That's what DeepSeek-R1 does.
Okay.
It's designed to solve problems step by step, like a human would.
So it's not just about finding the right answer.
Right.
It's about understanding how to get there.
Exactly. And by distilling this chain of thought knowledge into DeepSeek-V3, they've enhanced its reasoning capabilities significantly.
Okay.
It's not just mimicking human language anymore. It's actually learning to think in a more structured and logical way.
This is starting to sound less like a language model and more like an AI brain in training.
It is pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? And it's what makes DeepSeek-V3 so exciting for real-world applications.
Okay.
Because now you have a model that can not only generate text,
Uh-huh.
but also understand complex concepts,
Right?
reason through problems,
Okay.
and potentially even come up with creative solutions.
Okay, so I'm definitely seeing the potential here.
Yeah.
But we've been talking a lot about the theory and the how of DeepSeek-V3.
Yeah,
I know our listener, and let's be honest, me too is eager to hear about the practical side of things.
for sure.
How do we actually use this thing?
You're right. Let's move beyond the theoretical and get into the nitty-gritty of actually running DeepSeek-V3.
Because now we're talking.
Right.
So what are our options?
Luckily, there's a whole ecosystem of open source tools available, each designed for different needs and levels of expertise.
Okay, I'm ready. Give me the rundown.
First up, we have DeepSeek Infer.
Okay.
This one is perfect if you're just starting out and want to get a feel for what DeepSeek-V3 can do without a lot of setup hassle.
Okay.
It's a lightweight demo that you can run locally on your machine.
Sounds like a great way to dip my toes in the water and see if this whole DeepSeek thing is worth diving deeper into.
Exactly. Now, if you're ready to take things up a notch and have a bit more coding experience under your belt,
Okay.
SGLang is a fantastic option.
Right.
It's a robust framework that supports both NVIDIA and AMD GPUs, so you've got some flexibility there.
Choices are always good.
Right.
And it sounds like SGLang might be better suited for larger projects or more demanding tasks.
That's right. It's been optimized for speed and efficiency so it can handle heavier workloads.
Okay, what about if I'm thinking beyond just experimenting
Yeah.
and actually want to build a real-world application with DeepSeek-V3?
Then you'll want to look into LM Deploy.
Okay.
It's specifically designed for deploying large language models,
Uh-huh.
both offline and online.
Okay.
So you can integrate DeepSeek-V3 into your own products and services.
So that's the tool for taking DeepSeek-V3 from a cool experiment
Yeah.
to an actual working feature in my app.
Exactly. Now, if you're really pushing the limits of what's possible and have access to some serious hardware,
Okay.
there's TensorRT LLM.
All right.
It's optimized for NVIDIA GPUs and lets you fine-tune performance for maximum speed.
So if you're building the next AI-powered blockbuster game or something that needs to process mountains of data,
Yeah,
this is the one to go for.
precisely. And finally, we have VLLM.
Okay.
This one is for the truly ambitious projects that need to scale across multiple machines.
Wow.
It utilizes something called pipeline parallelism to distribute the workload efficiently.
Okay, so we've got a tool for every level of experience and project scope.
We do.
That's really amazing.
It is. And the best part is that all of these tools are open source, which means you can access the code, modify it, and tailor it to your specific needs.
This is really starting to feel like a game changer.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we're even having this conversation,
Right.
that a solo developer or a small startup
Yeah.
could potentially have access to this level of AI technology
It's crazy.
is mind-blowing.
I completely agree. And I think it speaks to the democratizing power of open source development.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about what DeepSeek-V3 is, how it works, its unique focus on efficiency, and even some of the tools available to start using it.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it really is.
Right.
I'm sure you're like me, eager to hear more about how all of this translates into real-world applications.
Yeah.
What can we actually build with this thing?
That's exactly where we're headed next. When we come back, we'll explore some exciting examples of how DeepSeek-V3 is being used in different projects and industries. We'll also dig deeper into the specific features and functionalities that make it such a versatile tool.
Awesome.
So stay tuned.
Can't wait. All right, we're back and ready to dive into some real-world applications of DeepSeek-V3.
Okay.
I'm particularly interested in hearing how this tech can be applied to solo dev and startup projects.
That's a great place to focus. You know, one area where DeepSeek-V3 really shines is in building AI-powered chatbots.
Okay.
Imagine you're developing an app or a website, and you want to provide users with a seamless and intuitive way to interact with it.
Yeah, like those customer support bots that pop up everywhere these days.
Exactly.
But I have to admit, most of them feel pretty clunky
Right.
and limited in what they can do.
That's because a lot of them are still based on fairly simple rules and decision trees.
Okay.
But with DeepSeek-V3, you can create a chatbot that's not just capable of basic question and answer interactions, but can actually understand the context of a conversation, reason through complex problems, and provide genuinely helpful solutions.
So it's not just about giving pre-programmed responses.
Right.
It's about actually understanding what the user is asking and responding intelligently.
Precisely. And that's where the chain of thought capabilities we discussed earlier come into play.
Right.
DeepSeek-V3 can actually think through the steps involved in solving a problem,
Okay.
just like a human would,
Okay.
which leads to much more natural and engaging interactions.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this could be a game changer for user experience.
Yeah.
It's like having a real person on the other end of the chat.
Right.
Only it's available 24/7 and can handle thousands of conversations simultaneously.
And the beauty of it is that you don't need a huge team of AI experts to build this.
Oh, that's good.
With the open source tools we discussed, like DeepSeek Infer or SGLang,
Yeah.
you can get a sophisticated chatbot up and running relatively quickly.
All right, so that's one example. What about other applications?
Okay.
I know a lot of our listeners are software developers. How can DeepSeek-V3 be used to actually improve the coding process itself?
That's another area where this technology is making waves. Imagine you're working on a project and you need to write a function to do something specific,
Right.
but you can't quite remember the syntax or the best way to approach it.
Oh, I've been there countless times.
Right.
It's like having the logic in your head, but struggling to translate it into code.
Well, with DeepSeek V3, you could literally describe what you want the function to do in plain English.
Okay.
And the model could generate the code for you.
Oh, really?
And we're not talking about just basic snippets. It can handle complex functions.
Okay.
Different programming languages even suggest optimizations based on best practices.
So it's like having an AI pair programmer
Yeah,
who's always there to help you out and catch those little errors before they become big problems.
that's the idea. And it's not just about saving time and effort, it's about empowering developers to tackle more ambitious projects and explore new ideas without getting bogged down in the technical details.
I have to admit, I'm starting to get a little giddy with all these possibilities.
It's pretty cool, right?
It feels like we're on the cusp of a real revolution in how software is built.
I think you're right. And it's not just about coding itself.
Okay.
DeepSeek V3 can also be used for things like code documentation,
Okay.
generating unit tests, even identifying potential security vulnerabilities.
Really?
It's like having an AI assistant that can handle all those tedious but essential tasks that often get pushed aside.
Now, you mentioned earlier that DeepSeek V3 is particularly well suited for solo developers and startups. Could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure.
Why is this technology such a good fit for those groups?
It really comes down to a few key factors. First, as we've discussed, DeepSeek V3 is incredibly efficient. It doesn't require massive amounts of computing power or expensive hardware, which is a huge barrier to entry for smaller teams with limited budgets.
Right. You don't need to be Google to use this.
Exactly.
Right.
Second, it's open source.
Okay.
That means you're not locked into a proprietary platform or paying exorbitant fees to access the technology.
Right.
You can download the code, modify it, and tailor it to your specific needs.
That freedom and flexibility are crucial for indie developers and startups who need to be agile and adapt quickly.
Absolutely. And third, the DeepSeek community is incredibly active and supportive.
Oh, that's cool.
There are forums, Discord channels, and tons of resources available online to help you get started, troubleshoot problems, and even collaborate with other developers.
So it's not just about the tech itself.
Right.
It's about having a community behind it that's invested in making it accessible and easy to use.
Exactly. And that's what makes DeepSeek V3 so exciting. It's not just a powerful tool. It's a tool that's specifically designed to empower individuals and small teams to do amazing things.
I love that. Now, we've talked a lot about the theoretical benefits and potential applications.
We have.
But I know our listener is eager to hear some concrete examples
Yeah.
of how DeepSeek V3 is actually being used in the real world.
You're right. Let's get specific. One really interesting example is in the gaming industry.
Okay.
Indie game developers are using DeepSeek V3 to create more realistic and engaging dialogue for non-player characters.
Oh, wow.
Instead of having to write every line of dialogue by hand, they can now give the model a few prompts
Okay.
and let it generate conversations that feel natural and dynamic.
So it's like having an AI screenwriter on your team,
Yeah,
helping you bring your game world to life.
that's a great way to put it. And it's not just about the dialogue itself, it's about creating characters that feel more believable and responsive to the player's actions.
Okay, that's a really cool example.
Yeah.
What about outside of gaming?
Mm.
Are there any other industries where DeepSeek V3 is making an impact?
Absolutely. In the education sector, some startups are using DeepSeek V3 to create personalized learning experiences for students.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a platform where each student has an AI tutor that can adapt to their individual learning style, provide targeted feedback, and even generate customized practice problems.
That's amazing. It's like having a personal tutor for every student.
It is.
Which could be revolutionary for accessibility and personalized learning.
Exactly. And in the healthcare industry, DeepSeek V3 is being explored for tasks like summarizing medical research papers, analyzing patient data to identify potential risks, and even assisting doctors in making diagnoses.
Wow, the possibilities really do seem endless.
It's pretty exciting.
But let's be realistic for a moment. We've talked a lot about the positives.
Yeah.
But are there any potential downsides or challenges to using DeepSeek V3?
That's a really important question, and I'm glad you brought it up. Like any powerful technology, LLMs come with certain risks and ethical considerations.
Okay, I'm all ears. What should developers be aware of?
One of the biggest concerns is the potential for bias.
Okay.
LLMs are trained on massive data sets of text and code.
Right.
And if that data contains biases, the model might perpetuate those biases in its outputs.
So it's like the old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
If the training data is flawed,
Yeah.
the model will inherit those flaws.
Exactly. And it's not just about overt biases like racism or sexism.
Right.
It can be more subtle things like cultural assumptions or regional language patterns.
Okay.
It's crucial for developers to be aware of these potential biases and take steps to mitigate them.
So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah.
How can you make sure your DeepSeek V3 application isn't inadvertently perpetuating harmful stereotypes or biases?
It starts with being mindful of the data you're using to train the model.
Oh,
Make sure it's diverse and representative of the population you're targeting.
right.
You can also use techniques like data augmentation to introduce more variety and balance to your training set.
So it's not just about gathering a lot of data.
Right.
It's about gathering the right kind of data.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process.
Well,
You need to constantly monitor the model's outputs, test it for biases, and make adjustments as needed.
so it's not a one-time fix.
No,
It's a continuous commitment to ethical development.
it is.
That's a really important point. So awareness, careful data selection,
Yes.
and ongoing monitoring are key to using DeepSeek V3 responsibly.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other challenges or considerations developers should keep in mind?
Another important factor is computational resources.
Okay.
While DeepSeek-V3 is designed to be efficient, it still requires significant processing power, especially for larger projects.
Right. We don't want to give the impression that this is something you can run on a 10-year-old laptop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'll need to make sure you have access to the appropriate hardware, whether that's a powerful desktop computer, a cloud-based server, or even a specialized AI accelerator.
Okay.
The good news is that there are now more options than ever before,
Right.
and the cost of these resources is steadily decreasing.
So while computational resources are still a consideration,
Yeah,
they're becoming less of a barrier to entry for smaller developers.
that's right. And with tools like SGLang and VLLM, you can even distribute the workload across multiple machines, further increasing your processing power.
Okay, so computational resources are important,
Yeah.
but they're becoming more accessible.
They are.
Anything else we should be mindful of?
Security is another key consideration.
Right.
LLMs can be vulnerable to attacks just like any other software system.
So if you're building an application with DeepSeek V3,
Uh-huh.
you need to think about security from the ground up.
Absolutely. You need to make sure your code is secure, your data is protected, and your API endpoints are properly authenticated.
Okay.
The open source community is constantly working on improving security measures, but it's important for developers to stay informed about the latest best practices and vulnerabilities.
Okay, so awareness mitigation
Yes.
and staying up to date on the latest security measures are crucial. This has been a really insightful discussion about the practical and ethical considerations of using DeepSeek V3.
It has.
But I know you've got even more knowledge to share.
You know me too well. There are a few more technical details about DeepSeek V3's architecture and functionality that I think would be really beneficial for our listeners to understand. They can help shed light on why this technology is so powerful and how to get the most out of it.
All right, let's dive into those technical details. I'm ready to go even deeper into the DeepSeek rabbit hole.
Yeah.
All right, so we're back and ready to unpack some of the more technical nuances of DeepSeek V3. I have to say, even with all the potential risks we just discussed,
Yeah.
I'm still really excited about the possibilities this technology opens up.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like holding a powerful new tool in your hand and you just want to see what it can do. But understanding how it works on a deeper level
Right.
can make you a much more effective builder.
Absolutely. So what are some of the key technical aspects that you think our listeners should really grasp to get the most out of DeepSeek V3?
Well, we've talked a lot about the mixture of experts architecture, but we haven't really dug into how the model actually decides which expert to call for a given task.
Right.
That's where the routing algorithm comes in.
Routing algorithm sounds complicated. Can you break that down for me and for our listener who might not have a computer science degree?
Think of it like a super smart traffic controller for your AI.
Okay.
DeepSeek V3 uses a technique called multi-head latent attention, or MLA for short.
MLA.
Essentially, it analyzes the incoming data,
Okay.
your text prompt, your code,
Yes.
whatever you're feeding into the model,
Yeah.
and identifies the most relevant experts for that particular job.
So it's like having a team of specialists standing by, and the MLA acts as a triage nurse, directing the problem to the right doctor, so to speak.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And the beauty of this approach is that it happens automatically behind the scenes.
Right.
You don't have to manually tell the model which expert to use it figures that out on its own based on the context of your input.
That's a huge relief.
Yeah.
I'm all for less manual configuration,
Yeah,
especially when you're dealing with something as complex as an LLM.
right. Now, another thing that's been on my mind is the concept of load balancing.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that DeepSeek-V3 has a unique way of ensuring that all of its experts are used efficiently.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Absolutely. It's a common challenge with MOE models. If some experts are constantly overloaded with work while others sit idle,
Yeah.
it creates bottlenecks and slows down the entire system.
So it's like having a team where one person is always swamped.
Right.
While everyone else is twiddling their thumbs.
Exactly.
Not very efficient.
But DeepSeek V3 addresses this issue with what's called an auxiliary loss-free strategy for load balancing.
Okay, I'll admit that sounds a bit intimidatingly technical.
It is a mouthful.
Can you explain it in a way that even I can understand?
Essentially, it's a way of encouraging even distribution of work across all the experts without adding any extra computational overhead.
Right. It's like having a built-in system that automatically shuffles tasks around to make sure everyone is equally busy. This is a pretty big deal.
Okay.
Because it means you get the benefits of specialization without the performance penalties that often come with it.
So it's kind of like having a project manager who's constantly optimizing the workflow to ensure maximum efficiency.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay.
And this innovation is one of the reasons why DeepSeek V3 is able to achieve such impressive performance even when handling complex tasks that require multiple experts to collaborate.
Okay, so the routing algorithm and load balancing are two key aspects that contribute to DeepSeek V3's overall efficiency.
Right.
What about the training data itself?
Yeah.
We touched on this earlier, but I'd love to know more about what kind of information the model was fed during its training.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Remember, an LLM is only as good as the data it's trained on, and DeepSeek V3 was trained on a truly massive data set of 14.8 trillion tokens.
Okay, we've established that's a lot, but what does that actually mean in practical terms?
Right.
What kind of stuff was in that data set?
It was a really diverse mix of text and code from a variety of sources.
Okay.
This included things like books, articles, websites, code repositories, even social media posts.
Wow.
The idea was to expose the model to as much human language and programming knowledge as possible.
So it's not just about feeding it a bunch of code or a bunch of text. It's about giving it a well-rounded education in both.
Exactly. And this broad exposure is one of the reasons why DeepSeek V3 is so versatile.
Okay.
It can generate different writing styles, handle various programming languages, and even understand concepts and relationships across different domains.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of technical ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the MOE architecture, the routing algorithm, load balancing, and the training data. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we discussed earlier.
Okay.
The ethical considerations of using LLMs.
You're right. It's important to keep those top of mind. We can't just get caught up in the excitement of the technology and forget about the potential impact it can have.
Exactly. So for our listener who's now fired up about DeepSeek V3 and eager to start building things, what are the key takeaways they should remember when it comes to using this technology responsibly?
First and foremost, be mindful of the data you're using.
Okay.
Garbage in, garbage out, as we said earlier.
Right.
If your training data is biased or incomplete, those biases will be reflected in the model's outputs.
So do your homework, make sure your data is diverse and representative, and be aware of any potential blind spots.
Exactly. Second, always test your applications thoroughly.
Right.
Don't just assume the model will always behave as expected. Try to anticipate edge cases, consider different perspectives, and make sure your application is robust enough to handle unexpected inputs.
So a healthy dose of skepticism and rigorous testing are essential. What else?
Transparency is key. If you're building an application that uses DeepSeek V3, be upfront about it. Let your users know that they're interacting with an AI, explain how the model works, and be open to feedback.
So no hiding behind the curtain pretending it's all human-powered magic.
Exactly. The more transparent you are, the more trust you build with your users. And finally, remember that this technology is still evolving rapidly.
Right.
Stay informed about the latest developments, best practices, and ethical considerations. The DeepSeek community is a great resource for staying up to date and engaging in these important conversations.
That's a great point. It's not a set it and forget it situation. You need to stay engaged and informed as the technology evolves.
Absolutely. The responsible and ethical development of AI is an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and collaboration.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the technical intricacies of DeepSeek V3 to the practical applications and ethical considerations. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly inspired and a little bit overwhelmed all at the same time.
I know, right? It's like we've been given this incredible new power,
Yeah,
and now it's up to us to figure out how to use it wisely.
exactly. But that's also what makes this so exciting.
Right.
We're at the forefront of a technological revolution, and we have the opportunity to shape how it unfolds.
And that's the message I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive. Don't be afraid to experiment, to explore, to push the boundaries of what's possible. But do it thoughtfully, ethically, and with a deep understanding of the power and responsibility that comes with this technology.
Beautifully said. So to our listeners out there, the world of DeepSeek V3 is now yours to explore, dive into the code, experiment with the tools, and build something amazing.
And remember, the future of AI is in your hands. Use it wisely.